Yeah, good morning, Steve. We indeed had an interesting year, 2024. It started relatively soft, but we had good growth, especially in the fourth quarter. And I'm very proud that we also delivered great quality in the fourth quarter. So the year 2024 had an upward trajectory, both in terms of revenue and in terms of earnings. And we have launched our strategy 2030 last year in September. And that strategy aims for growth. We want to grow 50% up to 2030, but we also already highlighted an element set up for success with a lean divisional structure. We're adjusting our legal structure, and we also need to work more on efficiency. That's why we've launched a program that we've already worked on, Fit for Growth, to enable us, Steve, to have the financial capacity to continue to invest. Unfortunately, in Germany, we have some structural challenges. We are the universal service provider for the country, which is a closely regulated business, and we have the structural decline in mail, and we have a lot of cost pressure also due to high wage agreements, and that unfortunately led to the circumstances that we have to reduce employment in that division.
Thank you very much indeed for that broad encompassing answer. Let's get straight to the most seismic news I've seen out of Germany in decades. Well, I say decades, certainly in a very long time. And that is the fact that the German government has completely changed, government in waiting, I should say, completely changed its hopes for the kind of spending that the federal state and the individual states will make for Germany to galvanise its activity. How do you read that, and what does it mean for you, sir?
Well, I think it will mean a lot of spending on defence, and I think there's broad agreement that that is needed. It will provide further impulse to the economy, the spending that is discussed on infrastructure. I think it's something that, in general, we're looking forward to. What you will hear, Steve, from many of my colleagues is, please don't use that now as an excuse not to work on bureaucracy and efficiency. We need to continue that work in Germany and in Europe to become more competitive, and a higher level of indebtedness and funding through these means cannot take away from the need to really become more competitive again.
Tobias, good morning to you. It's Karen jumping in. I was looking at some of your comments in the statement today around the trade wars and how that impacts supply chains. And I can see there's a couple of lines, no clear shift to domestic activities, which I think is fascinating. But also you're pointing out some fast growing regions as a result of trade lane shifts. Just unpick that for us and explain what is happening in these supply chains thanks to the tariffs.
Well, what we see, Karen, is that trade is astonishingly resilient. And you also see this in the US itself. The de minimis was revoked for 4 days, and then it was reinstated because Customs and Border Patrol could not handle these amount of volumes of additional clearances. And that's not only then affecting e-commerce, it's clogging up the entire system. Similarly, in the automotive sector, it was clear parts crossed the border multiple times, and it's obviously increasing massively the cost for the American consumer if you apply duties each time a part, a component, a finished product crosses the border. So that's why we have that volatility. For our business, we generally are a strong believer in the benefits of free trade. But if we have such volatility, it's not necessarily bad for a company like DHL. We strive on helping our customers in these type of situations, and it also adds value add in our industry, particularly if you think about the additional customs filings that are needed.
What about the small packages that are going into the United States that are no longer exempt from tariffs? The likes of Temu and Shein have been benefiting from that, but of course now targeted by tariffs as well. Has that impacted volumes, and what can we expect from the likes of Amazon, which is going to be going down the avenue of challenging some of these names too with that cheaper product?
So for our business, we clearly see that the structural trend from stationary retail to online, and thereby delivery of more packages at your doorstep, that continues. And the consumer might shift the platform that he's buying from, but that underlying trend is very much intact. And that's important for us because that's our main exposure as it relates to e-commerce, our last mile activities in many countries. Obviously, we currently see a lot of air freight capacity industry capacity tied up in the trade from China into the US and Europe, and that will shift. We have seen these shifts in the past. Remember several years back when the postal rates were changed, had a severe impact on that trade flow at that time, and we seemingly are in a similar situation now. The abolishment of the de minimis in the US would significantly change that trade, but also Chinese merchants will find ways, for instance, to do local fulfillment in the US. So there will be trade, but it will shift in its pattern.
Tobias Meyer.